Hello everyone, I'm Vivi and welcome back. Remember that day Crash 4 It's About Time was announced? It was back in June 2020 during Summer Game Fest. We had Jeff Keighley interviewing Toys for Bob's co-studio head and chief creative director Paul Yan. The part that had really caught my attention was the whole timeline of Crash 4. Paul Yan had stated that Crash 4 takes place right after the events of Warped. Uka Uka, Entropy, and Cortex, how they all got trapped in the past on an unknown planet. Alright, nothing too confusing, right? We have a game, a sequel, showing how they finally escape, kickstarting the events of Crash 4 It's About Time. Although Crash 4 is confirmed to be a sequel to Warped, there's still lingering questions surrounding the post-Naughty Dog era of Crash Bandicoot. A question folks had probably asked when this game was first announced would be this. Are post-Naughty Dog games still canon? Is Crash 4 completely going to disregard all the games that came after Warped originally? To answer this, it still seems like post-Naughty Dog games are still canon, and no, Crash 4 isn't ignoring those games. How do we know this? We have Paul Yan. During the same time period of Crash 4's announcement, we had an interview with Canadian Gaye. Whether or not post-Naughty Dog games would be referenced in the game or not, Yan replied, "For us, chronologically, that's where the events pick up. But this game is called Crash 4 It's About Time, and there are multiple timelines in this multiverse. The other events that happened after Crash Warped, they did happen. They may have happened in other alternate timelines, and those may be reflected in some ways in this, but this is a game that picks up right after Crash 3 Warped." If you're ever curious about that interview, there will be a link in the description below. Alright, so not only is Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time a sequel to Warped, but Paul Yan also mentions how all other games in the past did happen. If we understand this correctly, although all those games did happen, they may have been in alternate timelines. The multiverse, he calls it. They're canon, but in other alternate timelines is the way we look at it. There's also one thing I thought I could bring up. Remember that last voice line during the credits?
The events of this game are absolutely 100% canonical. Unless you didn't like them, in that case it was all a dream.
The voice says the events of this game are absolutely 100% canonical. Unless you didn't like them, in that case it was all a dream. If there's anything to take away from this simply reassures fans that yes, Crash 4 is indeed canon and follows the events of Warped. Then again, the part about this being a dream if you didn't like it, sure there's a comical factor to it, but it also seems like there's some kind of implication here. It's like saying, hey, you didn't like Crash 4, then do not fear. There's still the other games you can think back to. That's the thing. Crash 4 has pretty much open endings. We have Cortex stranded and then stumbles on Uka Uka. If we rewind, thinking back to Wrath of Cortex, the game which originally released after Warped on the PlayStation 2, what really happened in between? We don't know. In Warped, Cortex and crew are imprisoned, but then we have Wrath where everyone seems to have escaped, right? You gotta wonder, how did they escape? Toys for Bob pretty much answered that question with It's About Time. They took that mystery which was never solved or answered and created a plot surrounding their escape. With that in mind, Wrath of Cortex, if we take into account Paul Yan's statement, how the other events after Warped did happen, then there's a chance a sort of Wrath of Cortex could still happen after Crash 4, and here's why. Back in September 2021, Paul Yan held a GDC presentation talking about the development of Crash 4. Right at 14:35 of the video, he mentions how they wrote dialogue to make the game self-aware, like making reference to previous games. Not only that, other sequels also seem to be acknowledged.
It has a history like this joke that's kind of acknowledging the fact that it's ignoring some of the other sequels that are coming after this in its chronological timeline.
During this presentation, the scene with Lani Loli when he says, "Really? Only 3? Funny. Seemed like more." According to Paul Yan, the joke here is the whole ignoring of sequels that come after this in its chronological timeline. The chronological timeline part is where things get a lot more interesting. First, we have the whole other events after Warped did happen. They may have happened in alternate timelines. Second, we have the implication of other sequels happening after Crash 4 It's About Time. For the sake of example, we'll take Wrath of Cortex and place it after Crash 4. Like mentioned previously, we never knew what happened between these two mainline sequels in the past. Crash 4 It's About Time just so happened to have filled that gap. Now here's one thing we have to take into account. A full-on, say, one-to-one remake of Wrath of Cortex, taking place after It's About Time, wouldn't really make sense lore-wise. Think about it. Dingodile no longer seems to be part of Cortex's crew, let alone Entropy. In fact, he was banished along with female Entropy. If anything, Toys for Bob or whoever's in charge for the next mainline sequel, they could potentially take elements from these other sequels and make it their own thing. Call it a reimagining of Wrath of Cortex. It's About Time actually has a reference to Crunch, not only once, but twice. One on Crash's fridge right at the start of the game, and another during flashback tape outfit durability exam. Uka Uka still with Cortex and Wrath originally? Well, that could be explained. The 106% ending has Uka Uka appearing after all. Other than that, what are your thoughts on this current timeline? Could you imagine a Wrath of Cortex reimagining of some kind? Leave your thoughts in the comment section below. Like always, a massive thank you to my supporters on Patreon, and thank you all for watching. You can call me Vivi, and until next time,